We are talking Spin Fighters. We've got some early 90s movies posters on the wall here at the MBX Films Theater because, of course, the most known Spin Fighter set in the United States was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers set. Of course, that was based off of the Japanese show Super Sentai. So what I think I have here today is a very early precursor from maybe 92 or so of Spin Fighters. And it is this box. As you can see, it's all in Japanese. This is just in Japan that it was released, but we do have a year here for 1992. And you can see in the picture, this is actually Bandai's Spin Fighters. It's just a very different style, maybe an early style of them. And then the characters on here, of course, are Ultraman. So way back here, 50s and 60s, we have Japan developing their Tokusatsu shows, which are special effects shows like Godzilla or giant monster movies and shows. And then you have Ultraman here, which kind of started the sort of bodysuit, helmeted kind of superhero suit. Later you would get the Super Sentai, which is the team version. Ultraman, just kind of the one hero of the shows. Here we can see different versions on the side, and then of course there were monsters in the set that were all from Ultraman shows. We can even see on the back that they did have the same style launcher that you might have with the Power Ranger sets, this sort of flip open one. Just different stickers in there, looks kind of more generic, but it still has that, looks like it has that style inside, prismatic effect. I thought this was a super interesting little piece of kind of early Spin Fighter stuff. This would have been with the candies, actually, at a store in Japan, because inside the box, not only was there a toy, but there was a bag of candy would have been inside. A Ramune confectionery would have been inside. This is just kind of a hard candy that maybe had a fizz effect with the flavor, whatever it might have been. I don't have any candy in mine, so it would have been very old anyway. So this is just kind of a 100 yen, you know, cheap $1-ish kind of toy candy item that you would have just sort of bought for a kid on kind of a whim. It's kind of an interesting start for the Spin Fighters. So I'll kind of run down here. I wasn't all that familiar with Ultraman stuff, so I can run down here that I did ask on the subreddits, Tokusatsu and Ultraman's subreddits, and I got plenty of people ready to answer their knowledge of the show, more than I have. So top, of course, the original Ultraman, the first, and the second there is Ultra 7, which is the one I have the toy of inside here. Then we have Ultra Taru. Ultra Taru's style kind of looks like the pro wrestler Jushin Thunder Liger, so I'm sure there was inspiration there from Japanese lore and even the show, most likely for him. Ultra Ace, Ultra Leo, and then the kaiju monsters here that you could have got. Baltan, Bemstar, Eleking, Zeton or Zayton, and Red King, who is not red, and also has a much longer neck than is shown here. So the original Ultraman was in 1966, started, and then actually after that there's another show, but it doesn't have just kind of a superhero guy in it. That was Ultra Q, which apparently was a Twilight Zone style TV show, just kind of random stories and things that maybe didn't connect in a straight line story, but had the special effects of like the monsters and that sort of thing. If you know the show Are You Afraid of the Dark, where maybe there'd be characters that would come back, but most of the time all those scary stories the kids would tell were all individualized stories. They weren't part of a long running story or anything. Big thanks to old Mr. Cool 17611 on Reddit for giving me plenty of information about some of the Ultraman shows here, pictured on this early Spin Fighter toy. At first glance, Ultra 7 here reminded me of Gridman. I kind of thought it was maybe some kind of crossover thing, but apparently there was just a lot of different Ultraman costumes. Old Mr. Cool there said Ultra 7 was kind of the more serious show, and I think he meant serious in that probably some of the other Ultramans, they would goof around at times and be very silly, and maybe Ultra 7 was probably more like maybe the Power Rangers in the US, where it was played as serious, and maybe here and there there'd be some silliness just because it was a kid's show, but as far as the plot, I mean, stopping the monster was usually a matter of the Earth being enslaved or not sort of issue, so it was serious to an extent. Ultra 7 is probably much more serious than Power Rangers, but I think that's what he meant, that it was, the stakes were there in the show, unlike some of the, maybe the goofier, you know, like when you would watch an anime and there'd be episodes where it's just, it was a total goof off. It wouldn't even go to the serious plot, it would just be some goofy thing just to mess around. Ultra 7 didn't have a lot of goofing even though we might think it looks goofy now just because of its age. And right there you can see holding the original style Spin Fighter sort of thing. Someone on Reddit also did find on Bandai's website that they had this item listed out, and you can see pictures of boxes of it that have Kamen Rider on it also. You might know him in the US as Masked Rider, because there was a Masked Rider TV show that used that kind of footage from that show. They did do a crossover with Power Rangers just to introduce that show, create another hit off of Power Rangers here in the United States.
Dragon's ship is firing at all of us. Even Dragon isn't low enough to fire on his own soldiers.
That's what we've been trying to tell you all along.
Yeah.
So I didn't know about Ultra 7 before, but I did grab just a little figure of him to have with this, because the important thing to know about why I got this, since I did not know the show. Usually you would want to know the show or character or property of buying something for your collection. And my interest in this item was just that it was a very early version of the Spin Fighters that would get released here in the United States later. Also had a lot of releases in Japan, a lot more different characters than we got here. So this is kind of a cool historical piece, and I wanted to get, maybe a little bonus here with my collection just to represent early Tokusatsu, just because Ultraman definitely birthed things like Power Rangers and things that we have now, and just a piece of history. So we should open this up. Again, no candy. It's sealed on the top. That was wise of whoever had this before. It is open, so maybe they ate the candy, I don't know. But it has like a seal where you would have opened, but they decided to open it from the bottom, which was pretty smart. So you can see it was 100 yen. Let's just see the contents here. No bag of candy. Pretty sad. Gotta keep that box. That's a pretty nice piece. So I mean, this just straight up comes with the straight from the factory plastic bracket where you have to break out the plastic pieces. They didn't even bust them off. They just mold it and they're like, here, you assemble it, which is probably part of the fun for them, really. I definitely have fun as a kid kind of building it from scratch. And the other two pieces, this is the piece with the photo of the character, and then the style, of course, isn't a screen from the show. It's like a chibi sort of cartoony characterized style, which isn't what I would have chose if I was making these, but it is kind of funny to see them like that. This is like the image. Without this, it's just a top. So. And then the funniest part of all this, it just came with a giant metal washer. So these are just made of metal themselves. They just had kind of a plastic sleeve, looks like you put together, and then it just needed the weight so it would spin. It needs the weight so it can keep spinning a little more than just super light plastic. Just a big old metal washer. It's just so funny. This is just pure, so plain. It's so funny. Alright, so it's brand new from the thing, straight out of the box. Got right on the molding. Bandai, 1992, made in Japan. I am going to assemble this super old Spin Fighter just for you guys. And mostly for me, because I'm a collector. Just gonna twist that off there. It's gonna kind of have those plastic tags from coming off here. But are sharp. I might have to get a little scissor here to clean these up. Also, what's interesting, since this wasn't some big toy line, this piece you can put on and use it as a top where you'd have to spin with your fingers instead of the launcher, because the launcher might not have been that common to have with these, unless you were going crazy buying a ton of them for some reason. You definitely want the launcher. So here's just kind of a top from Kinder Joy, like Kinder Eggs that you get the little toy in with the treat, so just kind of a continuation of that tradition. So let's assemble this. Get the last piece. I believe you can see the directions for assembly there. It lists out all the parts and numbers them. This has the peg on the bottom of the photo piece. Line up the shape there, get that hexagon through. Plastic on the top, the metal at the bottom. That is sticking through, and we can line up the shape once again. There's no cranking in place at all, it's just all pushing in the shape. And here is a precursor to the Spin Fighters, or Komabatti, or however you would say their character batch sort of thing that they called them. Spin Fighter was obviously just the United States name. So there it is. It's just like The same concept. It's a little shorter. You can see I did get some Spin Fighters from Japan, the Super Mario set. I'll link that video here. The Japanese ones have more this style with the short and then the detachable bottom. These are detachable too, but man, if you've ever tried to take them off, you're supposed to be able to wear them. I don't know what the deal was, but these pieces do come off, but it is not a good time to get off. And once you get it off, it's usually pretty loose, so do not recommend. But they came assembled. This one had to assemble, and those Super Mario ones, if you go see my video checking those out. Look at this thing, it's crazy. So here's the test. It looks like in the picture that it uses the exact same launcher, but we will have to find out. What do you think? Is it gonna work? Only one way to try it. It's got the shape there, it's got the nubs, so I should be able. Seems to work. Wow. Loaded. Let's see. Seems to work. And so this just has a couple more nubs there that would just fit into these. So you could just have the plain top version. Not as cool as using a launcher. Plus it covers up your photo, so what are you really doing? But you can see why they... Oh geez. That really goes in there tight though. Ooh, you gotta be careful to get it out. Yeah. Whew. I mean, you know, if you didn't have the launcher, you'd want some way to play with it, otherwise you're just... I guess you could just display it, but it is just a metal washer with a plastic ring on the top. So I'm sure the idea was that you would get a launcher, get your couple sets there. I do not see on the box where it really said which one you were getting, because the demonstration picture is just the original Ultraman, which is not the one I got. I only knew which one I was getting because it had already been opened and the listing in Japan was showing the contents, that it wasn't assembled, and of course it didn't come with the candy, which did not bother me at all. So they were kind of random boxes as far as, I mean, maybe I can't read where it just says Ultra 7 right on it and I'm stupid, but that could happen. But it seemed to be a random pull, so you just have your few, have your launcher, and then you could fight against your friends that had a few. Maybe they had some of the monsters, maybe they had some of the Ultramen, that chibi style. I would have wanted pictures from the show, but probably easier to just print their cartoons there. The monsters definitely make me think of Kaiju Big Battle, just because Kaiju's based off of that, of course. But then especially the character style is what they like to depict on a lot of their merchandise and things. Pretty awesome piece. And again, my interest in this isn't exactly the Ultraman shows that I'm not familiar with, but that it's like a very early precursor of the Spin Fighter. Really cool. There's really only one thing we can do with it. Let's see how it measures up against one of the later models. Wouldn't you say? You have to do a little Ultra 7 versus one of the Power Rangers, or I don't know, he might take on Bret Hart or The Undertaker, I don't know. Or maybe Super Mario. Let's go see it in action here. Alright, we're gonna test out our Ultraman Ultra 7 early model Spin Fighter here. But in case you're not familiar with Ultraman, he didn't have a giant robot or anything to call on, he just grew himself big. So for the Red Ranger to face him, he's gonna have to use his T-Rex Dinozord just to match his size. Alright, let's see the matchup happen. I wish I had the original launcher that these were meant for, but I haven't seen it available. Alrighty, Ultra 7 and the Red Ranger's T-Rex Dinozord. Ultra 7 just a little too much for the T-Rex Zord. Of course the Power Rangers can form the Megazord, so can Ultra 7 beat the Megazord? He is still going in there. Ultra 7 and the Megazord Even the Megazord couldn't get it done against Ultra 7. How about if they combine all the Zords and make the Ultra Zord face Ultra 7? Maybe that'll match up. Let's do it! Right! Ultra 7 versus Ultra Zord! Even the Ultra Zord is felled by Ultra 7. Alright, the point I'm trying to make here, and I'll play what I said before I even started doing these right now. I'll tell you right now, this one's pretty heavy with that washer, so it's probably pretty advantageous. So I already could tell that this is just so much heavier with that huge washer on there. Seems with the same thickness and things, but it's just, I can just feel how heavy it is compared to this one, so that weight's really helping it beat pretty much any Spin Fighter this style. It's just too well made. The original, you can't beat, sometimes you just can't beat the original. So again, I was just using these Spin Fighters, one for Ultra and the Power Ranger one for the Power Rangers. I really wish I could find the one that went with that toy with the Ultraman ones, but this is what I have here. They're just the same, they just have different covers. Got a whole video about this one, I'll link here. So my reason for getting this, I wasn't familiar with the show of Ultraman, but I do appreciate the history of the Ultraman series and early films like Godzilla that kind of started the Tokusatsu and special effect kaijus and the costume transforming superheroes or the giant superheroes and such from Japan. I appreciate that this is just kind of an early version of the Spin Fighters that I just didn't know about until recently investigating them. It's just a cool piece as an early precursor, as that lineage that led to shows that could exist like Power Rangers and things like that from these early series. I thought it was very interesting. And if you want to know more about Ultraman and Ultra 7, then I will link the post of Mr. Cool because he can explain it far better than I can. Very informative. I'll link that all over the place because he was very helpful in letting me know what the deal was with this character, because I kind of mistakenly at a glance when I first saw the listing to get this item, so I ordered it from Japan, thought it was Gridman or something like that, but just wasn't familiar with all the different forms of Ultraman. That one holding the kind of cartoon Spin Fighter launchers. The Ultraman imagery I would know more so than the Ultra 7. I just thought this was so interesting as an early Spin Fighter where you had to assemble it and all this, and the launchers might not even been that common, so it came with the topper so you could hand spin it. It's really interesting. Led to these down the road there, different styles. A historical piece to my Spin Fighters collection. And hopefully you learned something today, like I did. Now that I think about it, I wish it would have came with that candy. Kinda want some. I'm especially interested in comments if you had this growing up, if you lived in Japan, or if you know anything about Ultra 7 and other merchandise from that line that you might have had. I'm very interested to hear, and any other comment you have on this early Spin Fighter or your story playing with Spin Fighters or anything like that, love to hear it. Plenty more Spin Fighter stuff to see here. Stay tuned.